Welcome back to Call Me By Your Game, the podcast where I, your host, Connor McCabe, bring on a guest to hear from them about a meaningful or memorable video game from a particular moment in their life. This is a show about what makes video games special to different people. Today, you are listening to a special edition of the podcast. This is none other than Co-op episode 55, the version of the show where I sit down with a group of people and more do an overview discussion on a video game that we have played recently. This is the first episode of the year 2025, where we'll do one a month. So you're gonna get one a month from January through December on this bad boy. Last year our theme was sequels, and this year our theme is indie games. And I did not mean for this first episode to seem like a complete bit and joke, because today on episode 55 we are covering none other than Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Full disclosure there is that we plan to do Shovel Knight for this first episode and Indiana Jones just as like a bonus 13th episode, but a concert that me and the guests of that episode were going to go to for Shovel Knight was postponed because the LA fires, and we want to talk about that on the episode, so we're actually going to cover that in April. Everything's getting pushed. That's basically getting swapped to April, and today we're talking about Indy's latest adventure. So didn't mean to be so corny and on the nose with this being an indie game, but here we are. A little bit of housekeeping up top is that anything that my guests or I plug on the episode today, you're going to be able to find a link in the show notes. So whether you're listening to this on Patreon, where it airs for $10 Engineer Toad tiers every month to your patrons, or watching on YouTube, scroll down, you're going to find a link, whether it's to a podcast, social media, who knows what we're going to be sharing today. And again, if you are listening and you're one of our patrons, this is a big ticket item for the Engineer Toads, so thank you so much for the support. If you're watching this on YouTube, thanks as well. Give the video a like, share this with a friend, whatever you can do to help spread the word about the pod would be great. I'll go ahead and introduce our two wonderful guests to get this panel rounded out for this episode. So please welcome, first and foremost, Mr. Jeremy Schmidt.
They called the podcast Indiana.
What's that a reference to?
Indiana Jones.
You know what? You've actually... No, I know. I'm teasing. You made a really funny joke like that at one point, Jeremy, on some episode of one of the podcasts we did like years ago, and it was one of the funniest things I've ever heard on this network. It was truly so good.
Yeah, I'm recycling it. Connor, I've never heard somebody be so ashamed and so apologetic of making a world-class joke. Like, indie games, Indiana Jones, that's a good joke, and you're like, no, it's corny. Oh, I suck.
Well, it was initially just supposed to be that we had 2 episodes in January, and one was an actual indie game, and one was Indiana Jones. I just know I'm less concerned about people being upset that we're not actually covering an indie game, because this is not an independent game by any means, and more so just wanted to let people know that they're going to get theirs later. In fact, next month we're covering Papers, Please, starting in February. So we got stuff coming up the barrel.
Well, patrons, I want you to write in. I want you to comment on this episode, whether or not you thought it was a good joke or a bad joke.
Please.
Come on. I mean, if we can get up to 50% good jokes, there's going to be a big surprise.
Hey, we'll take it. And I'll let you decide what that is. Jeremy, editor, producer of the show, thanks for being here, buddy.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
We're also joined by none other than the great Tao Yang. Tao, welcome.
Thank you. Immersive Sims? Why'd it have to be Immersive Sims?
Oh, we are just, I'll say we because I didn't do anything, but we are crushing these jokes. And Tao, very, very good, buddy. Welcome to the pod, dude. How are you?
Doing good. I hope you like my little bed fort in the back.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
That is cool.
If only I could use that bed to suffocate a Nazi, I sure would. Getting creative here with how I do it.
Yeah. I suffocated a lot of Nazis in the game. Do you remember all those suffocation missions we had to do? Putting pillows over sick Nazis' heads?
It's my favorite part of the immersive sim. They're all sleeping.
Well, It's how they want to go. That's what their preferred way.
Yeah. It's the most
Big time.
humane way to kill a Nazi.
Yeah.
I am so glad to have this panel here today. You two have been on a ton of co-op episodes. Jeremy, this is actually back-to-back co-op episodes for you because the last one we did was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 at the end of last year.
That's like when you like land a cool.
Yes.
A trick.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like when you get a tape too.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking.
It might be the same sound effect.
Yes, it probably is.
Probably same sound.
Jeremy, you've been on just a history of these. Tao, you've also been on a ton of co-op episodes. And most recently, we talked about Psychonauts 2 last year.
Yeah.
And Tao, I don't want to, count my chickens before they hatch, but I've got a feeling you might be filling a similar role on this here podcast as we get into our discussion of the video game.
I don't want to come onto your show and be like, this game has these flaws. I don't want to be that guy. So I'm gonna try to give a little find the positives.
Hey, you know what? But truly, share what you think, pal. Because as much as I am overall incredibly positive on this experience for myself personally, I also have nits to pick, so we'll get into it.
Okay.
Speaking of which, I want to start things off by discussing our personal histories with the Indiana Jones franchise in general, both movies and if you've played any video games, I want to get into it a bit, just to sort of set the scene for like what we're coming in here with, because myself, probably like a lot of players, is coming in with a lot of love for the series and nostalgia. So I'll just get things started for us and say that I've been watching, like a lot of people, the original trilogy, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, and The Last Crusade, since I was a young kid. This may have not been the first time I ever saw one of the movies, but I have this memory of being at a family reunion at a rural town in Illinois while visiting my grandparents at my Aunt Lorna's house, and them putting on Indiana Jones. I don't know if it was on for the kids, but I remember watching with a group of kids, and I loved it so much that my aunt, I believe, taped it from TV and sent us a VHS of it before we got the VHSs. Did you guys ever tape something off of a TV program?
Oh yeah.
All
the time.
Uh-huh.
The only way to do it.
That's how I watched. I feel like my mom would record like Halloween specials on TV and Christmas specials on TV, and then we would like rewatch them yearly.
Yes. I don't know why, too. It's like my other aunt. I know I mentioned my aunt. This is the aunt episode. Aunt Lorna and my Aunt Becky. Becky was who did this recording for us.
You had an Aunt Becky?
I have an Aunt Becky. Is that a famous aunt?
What
or
the
do you
heck?
have one?
What, you got a full house over there?
Oh, of course, Aunt Becky, yes. And Uncle Dave, which I've heard Uncle Dave has popped up in a few places. Is that Dave?
Uncle Dave Coulier?
So I guess I'm...
That's not his name in the show. That's not his name in the show. Yeah.
I'm Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen. Yeah, that's the truth. But anyway, I remember that's like first me getting into watching these movies, and then at some point growing up, I had these DVDs, and the Indiana Jones trilogy and the Back to the Future trilogy. Once I got like a TV in my room when I was, I think, 12 or so. I also had a DVD player that I put on top of this old CRT TV, and I would rewatch these movies over and over and over again, and just have such like a love and fondness for the originals. I remember going to see Kingdom of the Crystal Skull on opening night when it came out, and I wouldn't say I was one of those fans that hated it immediately, but I was definitely confused by the end. And since then, I've, continued to revisit these movies occasionally. It's kind of, Jeremy, I think we've talked about this. You know how like Super Mario World, I think I've mentioned, is the first game I'll play on a new Nintendo system when I get it, if it's possible. Indiana Jones is like the first DVD I pop in when I move somewhere, strangely.
Yeah. Oh.
So it's kind of been like that here. Like when I moved into this place, I think literally 5 years ago this weekend, I did that. And I will also say...
Have you upgraded to Blu-ray yet?
Not on these. Not on these. In fact, I'm actually going back to Laserdisc next.
Okay.
I'll try to wrap things up for me and just say I also love the theme park ride. It might be my favorite ride at the Disneyland park. And there's like so many bits that my college friends and I would have when we'd go on this ride. Like if I ever get to ride this with you, you guys are going to be so annoyed because I'm going to, as we go by the skulls, I'm going to say, there's real baby skulls. We're going to sing the part of the song when you finally get into the cavern and see the like lit up skull structure. And then two last things. I only watched about 20 minutes of the new movie that came out, I think in 2023. I watched it on Disney Plus and I was like, I'm drunk. I shouldn't be watching this right now. And then the other thing is I've played a little bit of Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, the LucasArts point and click adventure game that is really charming, but ultimately I couldn't like stick with it. Yeah, so I'm coming into this game with a lot of nostalgia, but I will say also, I'll finish this off by saying that I was not excited for this game. When this game was announced, I was like, that sounds interesting. Everything I saw about the game pretty much up and right until release did not have me wanting to play it at all. But kind of like my experience with Deathloop, right before it came out, something happened where I just started hearing amazing things about it and I got into it, which those games actually not too dissimilar in some ways. Jeremy Schmidt, I was just talking for a while. Why don't you get the boulder rolling for us and tell me about your history?
I love that you said
with
that.
old Henry Jones Jr.
Indiana Jones. Saw all the movies except Temple of Doom. Wasn't allowed to as a kid. They said, no, it's too violent. My parents were Christian. They said, only the ones that have Christian stuff in them can you see.
We like the racism, but the violence we're going to draw the line at.
Yeah, we're drawing the line at the heart gets ripped out. Then later, I'm watching Young Indiana Jones a little bit. I'm seeing River Phoenix. He's Young Indiana Jones. I think of the movie. And then, a little bit of the TV show Young Indiana Jones. Played... almost no Indiana Jones games. There's not really any that were huge hits. I played a little bit of that N64 one, the Blockbuster exclusive.
There's no way you hadn't toyed around with the Infernal Machine. Jeremy.
Infernal Machine, little Lego Indiana Jones too. On the Wii, played that. Love Indiana Jones so much. Think it's so cool. Hate the Crystal Skull. Didn't see the newest one.
Okay.
Would I have one more thing about Indiana Jones? No, I guess not. That's it.
Okay. All right. Well, Teo, how about you? What's your history with this franchise? How are you coming into this game?
Well, wait, first, can we go back to what you always play Indiana Jones when you move or have a new TV? Do you guys have other stuff like that? Like I listen to the same first song whenever I get a pair of headphones for some reason.
Cool.
Oh, what's this song?
I listen to RJD2, Ghostwriter.
Nice.
Which, like, I don't know why. If I get a nice pair of new headphones, like, I'm like, that's the first song I'm listening to as, like, kind of my test. You guys don't have anything else like that? Yeah,
for, like, 2 TVs now in a row, I've thrown on that Blade Runner 2049 to, like, check the HDR on it.
I love that. That's good. Yeah, that's a great one. Because that has
like a nice, you know what I mean? Like you can really push your TVs to its paces with that.
When I meet someone, I always make the same first joke, and if it bombs, I just leave.
If anytime I go do a comedy show, I'm usually in the car ride up playing Girl Talk, Feed the Animals.
I love that
to get fucking hype, you know?
Yeah, nice. Girl Talk's good. I used to do that with System of a Down for that album. But okay, so for Indiana Jones, I've seen the movies. I'm not like the biggest Indiana Jones like fan. I don't really have like much nostalgia for it. But I'm realizing now, as you were talking through the video games, the one game that I really love is not the Infernal Machine, but Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb, I think.
Yeah.
And this I played on Xbox, and this was when like the third-person action-adventure game was kind of at its height, I think.
Yeah.
Like this game, like Legacy of Kain,
Okay.
Like those types of games was really kind of like the golden era for it. And I remember this game in particular I really loved because it was like there's also a Buffy game too that came out that was fun.
Oh yeah.
It was like you would be able to like melee fight people, but there was a big emphasis on like environmental damage. So like pushing people into like spikes and stuff was a huge part of the game. I think I'm trying to remember. These games have all kind of melded together, but I really liked this game at the time. So this is kind of like my big like tent pole for Indiana Jones for me. Is this one game.
Dude, I earlier this year in like the fall, I watched this YouTube video where this guy basically just covered like every Indiana Jones game that ever existed, and this is one that I had never heard of, and like it piqued my interest. I'll say that.
No, it's good.
I'm really interested. You know, Connor, you mentioned something in your thing about how like you're looking at this game trailer or whatever before release and you like want to fucking puke and you're so sick you hate it. It looks so bad.
That's what I said.
And I'm like I'm so curious as to, I'm obviously exaggerating, but I'm so curious as to like what it was that made you, if you can place like what it made you change your mind, but also like why you didn't, because like here's the thing is I heard Indiana Jones game coming out and I delete that information right away. I'm just like, I'm not going to touch that. I don't, that does not sound like my thing. But I saw the like little playable, like they showed some gameplay of it at one of the Microsoft events or Gamescom or something. And right from then I was like, oh, I think this is going to be nuts. I think this is going to be really good. So I'm interested as to why you didn't think. And I also thought very similar things about Deathloop too. So what are you seeing in these that's rubbing you the wrong way?
You know what I think it is when I see a game highlighted too much before it comes out, but I also only sort of skim the information for what it is. Like I'll watch 30 seconds of like a trailer for this game. I kind of remember the gameplay. Maybe it was the same gameplay sort of video that they were sharing. Oh, I think it was maybe even over the summer at Summer Games Fest. But seeing that, like, first of all, I always thought, why would you play Indiana? Why would you put this game in a first-person perspective? I want to be looking at Harrison Ford the whole time. Yeah, that's kind of confusing. I was first person. I don't know. And then I was just kind of skeptical of how the action would play out. It felt like watching footage of it like over the summer that it felt like there were very scripted sequences that I was just like, I don't know how this is going to replicate itself in a more what they were sort of claiming was a immersive sim-light in like gameplay style.
Sure.
And so I was skeptical of that and just kind of like kind of brushed it aside, maybe unfairly. And I think what got me excited about it were two things. One was the Digital Foundry video covering this game and highlighting the specs and the differences between the Xbox Series consoles and the PC. And then once the embargo lifted on this game, a bunch of people that I really admire in the games journalist sphere were singing its praises, specifically people who also liked games like Deathloop and this sort of Dishonored and this sort of like first person sort of immersive sim game. I didn't hear all positive things about it, but I heard enough positives to where I was like, I actually think I really want to play this now. That's what it was for me. Were you saying, Jeremy, that you were coming first? You were like, I don't care, and then you were excited. Can you refresh me on what energy you were coming into this game with?
Yeah, I can't remember if I even really knew that the game was coming out long before I saw gameplay of it at, I think it was Summer Games Fest, where I saw it for the first time. And but I like, this is not the kind of game that I would necessarily like jump at the opportunity to play. It's a IP driven sort of franchise, like, you know what I mean, movie tie-in thing. And
yes,
and I'm not like, and like, with like the Jedi games, I kind of like wait a long time to see if those are, hold up to like jump on them. But yeah, something about watching that gameplay, I thought it was interesting that it was in first person. I was like, that is getting us far away from Uncharted. So I was like, okay, I like that. And then I'm like, okay, what else? And then, of course, we have this like uncanny performance from Troy Baker as Harrison Ford, and the vibe of the trailer just felt so Spielbergian and just had all the same sound cues, John Williams sound cues and stuff. So it just got me. That is what got me.
Okay.
Where I was like excited to
All
maybe
right.
try it out, and then knowing it was going to be on Game Pass. What
Yes.
the heck?
Huge. Teo, what kind of energy were you coming into this game with? Was it just a morbid curiosity? Were you excited?
I mean, I think Game Pass is like, okay, yeah, well, no, try it out. What do I care? But also, I think now we're in a space where a big IP video game, I'm like kind of curious as to what you're going to do. Because now, like, you know, most IP games aren't automatically going to be bad at this point. They're like, people are taking big swings. And you know what I ultimately appreciate this game is that it takes big swings, because I saw that was made by I think Machine Games, which have you guys played the new Wolfenstein games? Because those are pretty well made, and I think that's like really the only game that they've made. Maybe
Sure.
I don't know if they made anything else, and I'm like, well, they can't make Indiana Jones like a Wolfenstein game, like a just straight up like
Sure,
Doom,
yes.
just like gunning nonstop. So I was curious as to like what kind of game it would be, and so I was just like kind of very open to like what it could potentially be.
Okay.
And then hearing about like how it's slower and all like the visuals, I was like very intrigued. And so I was like, okay, I'm interested. I want to know what this is.
Sure. Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, I was pretty unfamiliar with Machine Games outside of sort of knowing them as the Wolfenstein people, and I just did a quick sift through their titles, and the only non-Wolfenstein games they've made is like a recent Quake game and a Doom Legacy of Rust last year. Somewhere in the ether, Hearn just like felt the franchise Doom get mentioned.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I wasn't familiar with them. I'll even say, like, getting into the game, I planned to play it on PC because the Digital Foundry video I watched really showed some stark differences of the performance and graphical fidelity between the Xbox Series X, which I know Jeremy played it on, and the Series S, which I have. But I purchased the game. It was actually a Christmas gift that I got purchased for me for PC, but my graphics card just didn't cut it. Teo, did you play this on PC or Xbox?
I played on PC, and my graphics card did cut it.
Oh,
But I did do a lot of like finagling. I was like, do I need to have RTX on or off, or like, do I need to put on medium?
Yes.
Do I need ray tracing on? Like all that stuff. And I even I even streamed it actually.
Oh, really?
Xbox cloud streaming. I got like a deal on some 3-month Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. So
sick.
That's
I
cool.
streamed it on my Steam Deck.
Dang.
Oh man,
That's sick.
I'm really living it up.
You really
yeah,
are.
you're like a modern man.
Gosh, I got some stuff to learn from you. But like I said, just PC wouldn't cut it, so I got a refund. Thankfully, Steam is pretty good about that stuff. And ended up re-upping Game Pass to play it on my Series S because I just wanted to play it so bad. And Jeremy, you were just a Series X through and through, right?
Yeah, Series X through and through. Game Pass, long-time subscriber. Keep that thing alive. Been playing a lot of Xbox lately, so I've been getting my money's worth out of it. And,
Good.
Just love that quick resume function.
It's really nice.
on the Series X. It's like nothing will beat the Switch's sleep mode of just wake up, go back.
Oh, yeah.
But this is kind of similar, and you can have multiple games in a hybrid state.
I'm still not used to the prompt being turn off console and not like put console to sleep, because I always am like, what if something happens? And almost never does I had a couple times during this game where when I reloaded the game from quick resume, it was like, oh, your progress changed while you were away or whatever, so we actually have to restart the game. And only once did that make for a frustrating moment in the game where I had like cleared out a whole Nazi camp, and then I was making my way to another one, and when it reloaded me, I was between camps and they both were full.
Oh no, that
was-
sucks.
It was only one time, and I actually was able to sneak my way out of it, but for the most part, it is a pretty amazing feature.
Yeah, during the LA fires that we just experienced, my
Yes.
power went out, which means that all my quick resumes got zapped, you know. And so, but when I reloaded Indiana Jones, weirdly, I was like, Indiana Jones was like standing in the same stairway that I had like left the game on, and like it was a weird thing of like, does this game just like autosave constantly? Is it always just saving your shit?
It's pretty impressive. Well, since we've kind of shared, our history and where we were getting into it, I want to share, do a little table setting for this game, and just get through some history and context before we finally dive into our discussion about it. So folks, I'm going to be monologuing a little bit, but feel free to jump in at any time. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is a 2024 action-adventure game developed by Machine Games and published by Bethesda Softworks. And this game has its share of Bethesda jank in it, does it? In sometimes a charming way, and sometimes frustrating. Set between the events of Raiders of the Lost Ark and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the story follows archaeologist Indiana Jones in the year 1937 as he attempts to thwart various groups who are seeking to harness a power connected to what is called the Great Circle, which refers to mysterious sites around the world that form a perfect circle when together on a map. The game spans numerous real-world locales such as the Vatican City, Thailand, Egypt, and even a brief moment in China and the Himalayas. The Great Circle is primarily played from a first-person perspective, which we've talked about a little bit. There's the occasional third-person moment, usually when you are climbing or using your whip to swing or attach to something. It's mostly, like environmental interaction stuff. But you, for the most part, this game is a sort of open zone game, as I would describe it, but a narrative, linear focused game. So as you're going through it, you can choose how much or little you'd like to interact with the side content and additional digging around that you'd like to do, because I think almost nothing is required side content wise to finish this game and progress through a section. Combat can either be directly engaged or circumvented largely through the use of stealth mechanics, and the character signature whip can be used as both a weapon or as a means of traversing across obstacles and solving puzzles to uncover alternate paths and obscured collectibles. This is also a game with a million collectibles in it, whether it's something you can use, an item, a currency, or even just like notes and documents. Bethesda and Machine Games jointly announced the game's development in January 2021 in collaboration with Lucasfilm Games, and the director was a man named Jerk Gustafsson, and composer Gordy Hobb contributed to original pieces and reinterpretations of classic themes from the films by John Williams. Todd Howard from Bethesda Game Studios. I bet he'd like it if I called him Tom Howard. Conceived the game story and served as an executive producer. And then, as Jeremy said, Troy Baker provides the voice and motion and some motion capture for Indiana Jones. And the likeness is otherwise, of course, based on Harrison Ford, who portrays him in the films. Jeremy, you touched on it earlier, and maybe we can talk about this more as we get into the actual games discussion, but I'm blown away by the uncanny vocal performance from Troy Baker.
Great job
in this. Like, you can kind of hear him sometimes, but I have no criticism for that. It's amazing what they were able to pull off.
Oh, definitely no criticism. He's doing great work to the point where I'm curious if any voice modulation or AI use was involved in this, because it's so on point. Except for every now and then when you do, like, Indiana Jones has to like lift himself up, he grunts, and it sounds exactly like Robin Williams. He's going like
Robin Williams.
What
am I doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
It must be so crazy to have to do all those like noises that you have to record as a video game voice actor, but to also be doing an impression of someone.
It's
doing
amazing.
Grunting.
Like, I would love to, I've shared plenty of criticism of some of the things that Troy Baker has said in the past, but of course, as a voice actor, he is just unmistakably like a titan of the industry. And I would love to hear from him about this journey of doing this work. It feels like he probably would have had to put in the amount of work that a serious actor would put into a role, just to pull this all off. Anyway,
wait, sorry. Can I say one thing about the context? Because this is almost like a Kaiser Soze moment for me. Of like, oh, this game makes a lot more sense now.
Yes.
Machine Games is founded by a bunch of ex-Starbreeze Studios people. Starbreeze Studios made the Chronicles of Riddick games.
Yes.
And now I'm like,
Thank you
oh,
for
that's
bringing this
what
up.
this game is. This is another version of Chronicles of Riddick.
100%.
Interesting.
But Indiana Jones.
It is.
Have you guys ever played this game?
I
No.
have. Connor, have you not? Yeah. Okay. So Connor, this game Chronicles of Riddick. I think. I mean, Teo, if I'm wrong, let me know. But like, it was like a weird IP tie-in game that ended up being like kind of groundbreaking in games a little bit. Like it did things that games hadn't done at the time. And I think like when you play Indiana Jones, the closest touch point is Chronicles of Riddick. It feels like an evolution in that direction that we hadn't really seen in games a lot. So
yes, which to me now I'm looking back like it's a little bit of a step back in a way, but like because I those games are incredible. I really love those games. It's like out of nowhere, like you would not expect this a video game of a kind of a random movie to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've definitely heard the mystique of how amazing this game is. I just never touched it. And gosh, it's so funny, Teo, to reference Starbreeze because we've talked about Starbreeze in our Psychonauts episodes.
Oh, really?
They were they were that investor who then had committed fraud or something and had to pull out. Anyway, couple last details here, but thank you for jumping in with that. That was great. Alessandra Mastronardi and Tony Todd are also featured in supporting voice roles. Alessandra Mastronardi plays Gina, Harrison Ford's opposite in this game, and you guys might know her as the Italian love interest that Master of None in season 2. Did you guys watch that show?
Oh yeah.
I don't remember.
I had totally forgotten about this, and I didn't learn this until this morning. But I'm like, oh, that's why I mean, she's an incredibly charming character in this, and the actor's amazing. But I was like, oh, that's why I definitely had a side crush on her, was because I had a crush on her in this show, and we're supposed to. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle was released for Windows and Xbox Series consoles on December 9th, 2024, which, is such an unfortunate time for it to get released because it kind of made it impossible to discuss for end of the year stuff for us and for a lot of outlets. And regardless of your opinion, just kind of wasn't really an option for the Game Awards, I guess. Maybe it was not, it could have been nominated for something, but I don't think it probably got its fair shake because
I heard they were pushing it to next year.
Maybe they are. They did that.
Yeah.
They did that when Smash Ultimate came out because it was December 12th release, but that's also tough because who's going to then revisit it again right at the year end? Anyway, interesting release time for the game. A PlayStation 5 version is scheduled for release in early 2025. That date has still not been announced, and the game received generally positive reviews from critics for Baker's performance of Indiana Jones, the gameplay, storyline, puzzles, and combat mechanics, and it received multiple year-end nominations, including Game of the Year at the DICE Awards. So someone was like,
somebody's counting.
Let's talk about this.
Do you guys feel bad playing this on Game Pass?
Sort of.
I feel I feel a little guilty sometimes playing these types of huge AAA games like Starfield. I was like, feel a little bad, and it's just it doesn't seem like this business model is sustainable.
How is this helping Machine Games and Bethesda?
Yeah, but I'm gonna do it because I'm gonna do it for Assassin's Creed when that comes out. Because I'm not gonna buy the whole thing when I can just get Ubisoft whatever Plus or whatever for the month that I'll be playing that game and burn out on.
I'm so curious. Yeah, I think it's a really great question, and it's the same question we ask of all of our wonderful streaming services.
Yes.
Is how are people getting paid? How much are they making from individual things? How are they able to track the data? How are they parsing it? Because Yeah, like, you know, Game Pass is a service that I subscribe to without breaks, and I might be playing a game twice a year. So,
Sure.
you know, if it costs $120, I'm at least, and I'm playing 2 new games on it. That pays that. Then I've paid for those. But like, I am so curious if like this is a bad business model, because we know that like Microsoft, unlike Sony, is like cash positive. Like they have so much cash to throw around at their gaming division, which is why they can tank almost every year and lose to Sony and lose to Nintendo and never give up, is because they can just keep sinking money into this problem. But you know, that can't happen forever. And I just wonder how much Indiana Jones did for them, or the Bethesda merger in general, how much that has done for them. Because Starfield, I think, was a medium-sized hit. I don't think it was like a huge thing that like people, definitely critically, was not received super well.
No.
So.
Yeah, it feels like for indie games, like you're like, oh yeah, it seems like a pretty good deal. In the same way though, like streaming kind of, you know, everyone says for at least in the beginning, streaming made everyone hit like a double basically.
Yeah.
No matter what, and it kind of just flattens out like your heights and your lows, which is probably good for an indie game. But I'm like, for like a Bethesda main,
but
like
for
Starfield,
game.
yeah, for an indie game it's great. But for like Starfield, I'm like, that should have the potential to be like a bajillion-dollar game. But it just, how does Game Pass like affect that? Or like this game, like, you know, it's got a huge IP coming out during Christmas. Like, how do the economics work there? It's kind of crazy.
It's a great question, and to answer your question too directly, is that I was so excited about this game that I did purchase it on Steam because I wanted to own it, because I just had which is can kind of be a mistake when I could just play it for literally $20 on Game Pass. I canceled my subscription last night. It'll be up February 1st. It's going to be gone, and I think I want to own this game. Like, I think I will buy a discounted version of the PS5 disc when it comes out, because I can't own the Xbox One because I have a Series S.
Right.
So, yeah, and I wanted to, like, I do feel weird about that as well, especially a game that just, you know, came out. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I feel weird about owning physical media when it doesn't all fit on the disc too. Like, that's another thing where it feels like that ownership is an illusion.
It is.
Oh, it is.
You know, like,
because if it goes down, you won't be able to download it in like 10 years or whatever.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Oh, that almost is a case for having it on Steam again, if you have a system that can run it. Well, any other additional points of context you guys want to get out before we jump into our discussion?
No.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, let's jump into it. There's so much I want to discuss today. But the place I want to do 2 things as we start. A, I want to address where we are in the game, because I know we'll just get this out. Tao and I have finished the game. Jeremy, where are you currently?
I am. I don't even want to say. I'm so embarrassed. No, I'm in Giza still.
Yes.
I played a bunch yesterday and this morning, but I'm still there, so I haven't seen back half of the game. Feel free to spoil whatever. Do not care.
You're pretty far into it. You're basically 2/3 of the way through.
Yeah,
and can kind of end that at any time.
Yeah.
Okay. Only if you're sure, Jeremy. Because
I'm 100% sure that this is not one of those games that I'm feeling particularly so immersed in the story.
Cool.
Also, do the good guys win? Come on. I don't know how big of a deal the spoilers are for it, but yeah. So that's where I am. I'm Giza, and I'm far into Giza. So
great. I wanted to get a temperature check from you. Tao and I have both finished the game.
Yeah.
So that gives us a good place to start. So, I mean, the place that I actually want to start and discuss is, I think, the point that I was most surprised to come out as positive as I am, and that is the narrative of this game. While it is, spread out over, for me, what was a 27-hour experience and not over an hour and 45 minutes, I came away from this, I think this is my personal favorite narrative in the Indiana Jones series, largely due to the fact of the character work they do and how a point that I don't think that you definitely haven't quite reached yet, Jeremy, which is the sort of like the character understanding and resolution that Indiana Jones goes through in this game. Particularly being the nuts thing to me about this was I did a side quest in the final area, which, Jeremy, is in Thailand, if you didn't already know. I did a side quest that basically unlocked this whole understanding of like of what has been haunting Indiana Jones. It really just underlined that, which was how he is never in the place where people need him because he is so, excited and curious about adventure, and how that has essentially kind of like ruined his life in certain ways. But I think what was the most interesting thing for me about this is that by the end of the game, he comes to terms with this and realizes that what actually is most important to him in the moment is getting to safety and getting the person he cares about to safety and not losing her like he's lost many other people in his life, including Marion, which is underlined many times in the game. But in that moment where he expresses this to her, she kind of flips the mirror back at him and is like, but aren't you curious? Don't you want to go down this last road and really see what it is, Indiana?
Hell
is this what you want? Do you really want this or do you want that? And he is like, I do want to see what's going on, so let's go down that path.
Woo!
It was kind of
It's all about your work, not your friendships and family.
I found it really interesting because, like, I think it would have been a little unsatisfactory if the game had ended right before you go and find out what the Great Circle is truly about. But at the same time, I don't know. It just kind of, I don't know. Tao, did you have any thoughts about this whole thing and the sort of character arc that he goes through in this game?
Well, I kind of rushed through at the end, so I really didn't see much in terms of arc. But no, I thought as an Indiana Jones story, it's like pretty good. Like it's like a fun, like mystical, magical thing that exists. Like that was very fun. It's just, it does like kind of a tropey Indiana Jones story very well. All the characters are really good. I like the Italian priest who's into like rock music.
Oh yes,
I love that. Like I like the Nazi villain.
Voss.
Voss was, I thought that was pretty
Rich
fun. Like
Voss.
everything was,
Winklevoss.
everything was Winklevoss twin.
Yeah.
I thought it was all good. I thought it was all very well done.
Cool. Yeah, I think some of the things you were talking about too, sort of like sprinkled in there, really made it feel like, because we all played this game in different ways. Jeremy's about 2/3 of the way through. Tao finished it, but as he said, rushed through part of it, and we're going to hear more about that later. I really loved taking my time with it, and I felt like it was so rich throughout that it was like, of course, we had Indy's arc and the main narrative, but that all the moments and the moments we have with characters throughout, particularly like the guide you would have in every area, all the different, your sort of different point person, I really loved. But the main thing that I walked away from it really satisfied with was like Indiana Jones almost being paired with someone who understands him and who he is the best, and as much as she also cares about him, it really wants to make sure that he's making the right choice for himself, or the choice that he truly wants, even if that's not good for him ultimately. So I love that. I don't even know how much of this taste you've gotten so far, Jeremy, up until the point you're in.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like none of this is very surprising. I mean, I think that like, and again, listener, take everything I say in this whole episode with a grain of salt. I haven't finished the game yet. And I do feel like I'm going to be lean more positively on the game because games tend to overstay their welcome. You know what I mean? Like, so, but I do think like in terms of a narrative so far, this up to the point I'm at, this has felt very much like almost an Indiana Jones story randomizer or something.
Oh yeah.
Where it's just like put different like beats of typical Indiana Jones stories together. And the fact that you're saying it has this sort of take on Indiana Jones that maybe we haven't exactly seen explicitly laid out in the movies as such, only proves to me that the developers didn't just approach this as like, we got to make a fucking cool Indiana Jones game. They approached it with a take. They approached it with like sort of an idea, which I think is it's kind of expressed throughout, for as much as this game can feel a little bit like insert Indiana Jones moment here, insert Indiana Jones moment here. I mean, at the point I am in Giza, it is like almost exactly what happens in Raiders of the Lost Ark when he goes and does the whole light shine. I'm doing light shining puzzles, and I'm just like, yeah, of course, yeah, this is what you do when you go to a dig site. Yeah,
mirror.
Yes.
And also it's it is it a cry for help? Well, you know, when it's like the theme of this story is focusing all in on your work at the sacrifice of your family worth it? Crunch game developers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Truly. I think, Jeremy, you make a really interesting point there too about like them having a take with the writing here. But I also I think one of the points I'm trying to make too is like, I also don't think it's kind of like a hack, take on a story of like, well, what if we had Indiana, like, actually he cares about only the people in his life. Like, I think they somehow stayed true to the character, but gave us another almost layer to him. I'm going to point out another game, which I think does a lot of things really well, but maybe is just a little less satisfactory to me as we move along from it narratively. But the whole like, what if, Kratos was a dad thing, that would change him. I think it's an amazing game, but I'm glad that this isn't just recycling that take, because I feel like we sort of see that a lot. I think it works for that game amazing, but that maybe wouldn't have been satisfactory to me here.
Well, I think it raises a really interesting question that I feel like I personally am often faced with when we're talking about like making art and stuff. Making art is such a pleasure. It's not like, it's easy to learn the lesson that I need to invest more in my friends and family when I'm like a tax guy, because like that job sucks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some people can enjoy it, I guess. But when your whole job is adventuring, you know what I mean? Like, it is a hard choice. And I think that's I think that's a very apt and interesting concept of like, to some folks, maybe going on adventures is their life, and like maybe family is like, maybe they don't learn that lesson. I don't know. It's like it's an interesting. I think it's interesting when you love so deeply the thing that you do, and it's so much a part of your identity.
Yes. Yeah. I think that really hits the nail on the head, Jeremy, and was something I was trying to like gather my thoughts last night before we came into this, and because I walked away so positive, especially on the narrative, and I was like, why is that? And it's kind of basically the conclusion I came to as well. Tao, you have played through, you were one of the first people I knew who played through this game. What is something you want to discuss? What's an aspect you want to dive into, positive or negative? And I hope he says negative.
I guess I keep comparing this game to both Uncharted and Last of Us. Mm-hmm. I'll go with I guess we could start with like the presentation of it all, where like, it's the same as like both those Naughty Dog games are basically trying to be like Hollywood movies.
Yes.
But from the video game angle, and this is like the other way around, where it's like, this is a Hollywood movie that's trying to be a video game.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you're like, this is going to be cinematic, the attention to detail and the pacing of it really is important. Mm-hmm. And like, did you guys feel like they're just like in the cutscenes, like forget about the gameplay parts, but like the cutscenes, there's just awkwardness.
Oh,
and I think that awkwardness is really, I think it takes like a lot of focus and a lot of like money and time to like really fine tune like the pacing of things, and where I think Naughty Dog really focuses on that, so they do it really well. Like no cutscenes have like an awkward beat. There's no like a pause or an that feels like is there a pause here because like the game's like loading or something?
Yeah,
and that's where not constantly, it's not that bad, but it's just something that's like very noticeable, especially when you hit like this uncanny valley like moment with this Indiana Jones game, where it's like you're going to be a movie. You got to pace it like a movie. You can't have like awkward scenes. And they were just like,
yeah.
So and for that, it's like you kind of make this problem by making a game like this. I don't know.
I want to, so Tao, I felt that throughout the game. I mostly though, and I want to know if it's a similar experience if you're talking about something different. I mostly felt it like at the end of so many scenes, we would just hang there a little too long.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I don't know if it was the directing or if it's like, it's literally a technical thing with the game that the next moment hasn't loaded in yet. But did you guys experience this too?
Yeah, and I feel like there are examples, and I could be wrong about this, where it feels like they meant to cut away. They meant to cut to something, and you'll see like the awkward end of like, say that someone's shoving somebody, you're supposed to like cut there, but you'll just see a guy like walk off frame, and it's like, what happened? Like you didn't get to see the action or something. And that feels like a Bethesda jank kind of thing to me. Like it felt like I got a lot of that in Starfield, where you're right, Tao, you'd get none of that in a Naughty Dog game.
Right.
Not with the cutscenes.
I guess like in Bethesda games, like it's all like they never like have a cutscene, right? So it's just like I don't know. You know what it is? It's like you're making a game that is effectively like a movie. You're competing against Spielberg, and like. You have to really bring every little, like fine tune every little single scene.
Yeah.
There's so much of it. There's so much content in this game that it's probably hard to do, but like, man, it just really feels apparent in this game.
That's so, you make such a great point. Something that this makes me think of, last year I played Half-Life 2 for the first time. I actually covered it on this series. And one thing that I think that game crushed in 2004 and is still so powerful is the storytelling through that first-person perspective, both from an environmental standpoint, but even the moments where you would have what you might consider a cutscene in other games of like a story moments happening between characters, a conversation, what have you, like a big something falling from the sky. I think that showed that it's very possible to do it and do it so effectively. I would be willing to bet that two reasons that they didn't do that in this game is that A, it's Indiana Jones, so they're like, we have to have movie cutscenes, whether it's to the detriment or not. And then also, like, I can't imagine, again, playing as Indiana Jones and them not at least making a meal out of the moments where you do see Harrison Ford's face. They're like, we have to live here as long as possible in these cutscenes. Just an interesting, I mean, it's a choice and I don't hate it, but I agree with you. There was awkwardness there for sure. And you also, it sounds like you're also saying that just like in the scene itself, not just hanging on the end, there was just some of that
little bits and pieces. And I do recognize, it's like not like, oh, why did they do this? It's because I do recognize like it is not easy to do that. Like like now games nowadays have like when you're in gameplay and you have a companion or something, and then like they say something but it gets interrupted.
Yes.
And then they're like, what was I talking about? Oh yeah. And then go back into like their character moment. I'm sure that takes someone like a year to fully implement. Like that system of just like, how do you restart a conversation that gets interrupted by some gameplay thing? Like all like those, and to just be able to like really optimize and say like, okay, we're going to make sure that these assets load in time, but we have to do it, across both like all these different systems and PC systems. Whereas like Naughty Dog is just only doing it for PlayStation games, at least at first. They can really easily fine tune. Like we know exactly how this is going to load. We can get all this stuff loaded before this cutscene ends and stuff like that. So
yeah. This even I will say amidst this aspect of the game, which I agree with you in a lot of ways. This did highlight, at least still somehow highlighted performances for me. I know we've talked about Troy Baker as Indiana Jones. It was amazing. And some of the other actors too, like I was talking about Alessandra who plays Gina. I was just so charmed by so many of the characters, the specific personalities. You were talking about, Jeremy, about the priest that you're friends with in the Vatican. He's amazing. I think it's like...
Oh, yeah, Tao was saying he likes the priest
Tao.
with the rock music.
Yes.
I mean, like, look, huge Tony Todd fan over here. This is like Tony Todd's final performance. He has since passed away. like a huge fan. Like, he was the original Candyman, and in the Final Destination franchise.
Yes.
And in this game, he's playing like a giant. He's playing like a Nephilim guy or whatever.
Oh.
And I just think his whole thing in the game is just so great, and he's such a great addition to the game. And like, I love that fight scene that takes place in that really tight. In those tight quarters, you know, in at the bottom of the Vatican when you're seeing like the treasury or whatever. Like, yeah, it's just like there's a lot of memorable stuff going on here, and overall, I do think like that translates to like kind of memorable game.
Yeah,
you know,
definitely. I
like
think
there are like to compare it to an Uncharted, there are these huge peaks in these Uncharted games where I'll never forget the helicopter scene in 2. You know, I'll never forget the plane scene in 3. But there's huge swaths that are like very forgettable. And I do think in this game there's something there that's like it's grabbing me more. Like I think I like Gina, for example, more than maybe not all the Uncharted companions, but some of them, like
totally. Yeah, no. Great point. There's so much that I found really memorable about this game too, both in kind of what, in comparing Uncharted and Indiana Jones. Maybe this is the next sort of thing this can make me be a jumping off point for us, but the set pieces in this game I really loved throughout, which that's one place where I think it is kind of similar to Uncharted in the sense that they both really make a meal out of some amazing moments like that. Whether it be, climbing to the, what's the ship that you leave the Vatican on, the big blimp thing?
Oh, Zeppelin?
Yes. When you are climbing up that tower and looking down on the Vatican that you have left and up to that's just such an amazing moment of spectacle. And I have others too, like later in the game. This is one Jeremy hasn't experienced, but Tao, the sort of last little temple you go to in Thailand, if you remember that you have to swim to get to, that whole sequence as well, I loved. What did you guys think about that?
You spent, this is like a 30-minute sequence in the game, is when you are in Shanghai and it's like bombed out.
Yes.
And you just have to like escape really on a plane. I'm just like going around, like it's like supposed to be like very like fast paced because you're like escaping, but I'm looking around, I'm like, damn, they really modeled out this city, all the assets, like everything is like all this like Chinese architecture and furniture. I'm like, is everywhere, but it's also like destroyed because it's like a bombed out city. I'm like, they really went all out, and this is like a 30-minute sequence. Like this, we do not come back here in any way.
Yes.
It's incredible, which is really incredible. It's a fun, interesting little sequence, but I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
It's funny how they kind of, Jeremy, between the second and third areas, there are two smaller gameplay sequences like that Teo's talking about, which I think you might. I mean, I want to hear from you when you finish this game too, and what you think about those moments, because they were some of the most fun in the game. They also broke the game up. I felt it was a nice change of pace from, instead of exploring a big wide open area and sort of like going at your leisure, choosing what to do, this was like, no, this is a very narrative focused sequence and you just need to get through this. I really liked.
One thing that I think that's helping those moments out a lot, because like maybe you would compare it even to like how the game opens, right, with the opening sequence of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes.
Another comparison point for Uncharted is that like Uncharted has these like huge set pieces. And because it's like a third person game, like just by virtue of that, your camera's backed out. It's like wider. You're able to like see more. You're able to like, and so because of that, they're kind of doing more moment to moment. Like I would reference the helicopter scene as like that's an extreme moment of like lots happening, crashes, buildings coming down, incredible stuff. Indiana Jones is just like, there's like philosophy on this is like a little different, where it's like sometimes you get these like pulled out moments, like you were referencing the Zeppelin moment where you see Italy from like the top down or whatever.
Yeah.
But most of the time you're so inside of the spaces that it's like you're digging into a space. So a lot of the wonder is coming from micro things you're seeing, and I think, and like neither one to me is better it's just like a whole different way of thinking about
Yeah.
a space, you know?
And I think they do that too with like how you play as Indiana Jones, where it's like
Yeah.
he's a person.
Yeah,
Like, he's like a normal human
lumbering,
being,
slow guy. Yeah.
right? Where you're like,
Strumbo.
okay, I'm Strumbo. I'm climbing slowly up the wall. I'm like all the little things of like the stamina and stuff. It's like you clearly try to make it like, because I guess that's also the appeal of Indiana Jones is like he is kind of a normal human being. He's
Yeah.
not some superhero too. So it's like they really did that with the gameplay where it's just the moment you climb something, you're like, oh, I feel it. Like this is taking a while to get up these stairs or whatever.
Right.
Yes. Do I want to eat into my extra stamina from the apple I
Right.
just ate, or do I want to rest for a second and then keep going up?
Always eat your stuff, I'd say. You got to always
Dude,
eat it because
don't
you
save
find
your
more
stuff.
constantly. Yeah, don't save your stuff.
Yeah, I did like finding, this is such a small thing, and there's a few things that we could talk about regarding this, but finding the different like consumables, whether it be bandages were kind of the same throughout, but finding the different fruits, they were really fun. Depending on the area you were in, you would find different fruits in Thailand than you would in the Vatican, and even the like baked goods that you would find were so different. And I loved, kind of like in Skyrim, looking at like a sweet roll or something. I love looking at those little things because you can kind of put it in your hand and then eat it. I felt like that showed like I love the care that they took from, we've talked about the design and the visuals and the architecture and stuff. I thought that was another just such a strength of this game was the attention to detail there. Both in the things you interact with and just the vistas. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, one of my favorite things is that the map. Like I love that stuff. That you can only look at the map if you look down, which I thought it's one of those things. I'm like, I love those kinds of small little details where like, yes, you are a person. You don't just have like a box show up in your like peripheral vision or whatever. Like,
Right.
Yeah, totally. Certain games I probably would like bump up against that, but for this game, I really enjoyed it. And sort of like one of the notes I took down was I realized after playing, like while playing this game, that the only power fantasy I really have in this world is being Indiana Jones. And that even includes all of the like clunky stuff of like having to hold up your map to look at it. You were saying. I love that.
I have a question though,
Go ahead.
though. Like, did that wear out its welcome over time? Because like that is something that as I'm playing it, I'm like, I'm loving this, but I could see it getting old as you get into the 27th hour.
I'll be curious to hear what Tao says. I think that there were definitely, while I did like that element, Jeremy, there are definitely moments where I'm like, I would just like to have like a little map up here to see, even if it breaks my immersion.
Yeah, sure.
But I think for the most part, I preferred the choice. It's just that there were moments of inconvenience. What do you think,
yeah,
Tao?
there were kind of annoying moments like towards the end where it was like you have to like run out past the crumbling temple, but in order to do that, you first have to like sidle and like crawl to, like on this like ledge. And so I died a few times and I was like, okay, well, this is starting to get annoying now. I have to like slowly watch him crawl every single time. But I also really appreciate the choice. It didn't ever feel like, I really do like love the having looked down at the map, and it's that kind of immersion stuff. I really like that. It never got old.
Yeah. This makes me want to, talk about the gameplay a little bit. And there's obviously many elements to the gameplay here. But I know that Tao, you were like, maybe the way how did you describe your experience with the gameplay? Did you say that it sort of wore thin for you or didn't evolve? What was your take on it?
My big things that kind of it left me wanting, I think, is first of all, I thought the puzzles were pretty across the board were weak. Like none of them were remotely difficult. I would even say some of them weren't. I would barely consider them puzzles. Like that, and that the gameplay didn't really change at all. I think you're playing the game the exact same way from hour 1 to hour 20 or whatever. It's not that long of a game. There's no, and I don't know if like what I wanted was some kind of Zelda-esque like item system where like, well, now I have these items and these items, but you don't really get anything. You get the lighter,
Mm-hmm.
That's about it. And even then, the lighter just like unlocks a couple of crawl spaces, and that's really it. So there's no changes there, and like, you know, maybe I was expecting like some new melee moves or something, but you know, all the upgrades are just like 10% more health, slightly more damage, that kind of stuff. So it's just one of those things where, and like, you know, a game like Uncharted, technically also you play pretty much the same, like nothing is really that drastically different, but like the areas get more complicated. They throw more stuff at you, where it's like you master these systems, and then they throw more challenge at you. But that doesn't really exist in this game either, where it's like none of the enemies get harder or different in any way. None of the areas get more complicated or like trickier. Like it's not like a bigger temple that you have to hold in your brain. So like it just didn't change from hour one to the end in any way that felt like a progression.
Yeah, I think that's so fair. Jeremy, have you experienced that in your playthrough so far?
Yeah, I would jump on the back of what Teo's saying and say that that's right, and I agree. And I think the way that the game does change is all aesthetically, and I think that's a trick that is less apparent when you're younger and you have less like experience playing games, you know. And I think it's like when you get a little older and you like kind of understand a little bit more about game design, it becomes a thing where you're a little bit like disappointed, and you're able to notice it a little more. Like if I was like 16 and I was playing Indiana Jones, I wouldn't have been able to like eloquently say what the problem was, you know. Like I would have just been like maybe just like lukewarm and not really known why on it. But like I agree that like I love the aesthetic changes to the different zones that you get to go visit, and I do think like the puzzles are weird, right? Where like puzzles have to almost like, if you're in a first person point of view, they could have done, and they even kind of tried to sometimes do stuff that like the Witness or like perspective puzzles and stuff. Like but like, man, if they had like actually tripled down on that, and I would even say like take more combat scenarios out of the game, I would have loved that more, because because like I do find the combat specifically in this to be all the stakes of it are like I'm not good at it. that's why the stakes are high, is because I'm approaching a situation completely not good at doing this. And like while I do like that sometimes, I felt like you could have replaced a lot of those with like more elaborate puzzles. I also came out of playing a game like Silent Hill 2 Remake, which is like Puzzle City, baby. And there's even like accessibilities to the puzzles. Like you can crank the difficulty of those puzzles all the way up and crank the combat way down, and you're just playing a puzzle game at that point. And it's like it's a lot of fun. So I think like if they were, and I almost guarantee they'll probably do a sequel to this at some point. That would be awesome. That would be my one thing I would push if I was them, is like more puzzles. We like puzzles. We don't like fighting and guns and killing. Like it gets kind of clear they want to separate themselves from Uncharted in that way, and I think lean more into what your strengths could be, you know.
This is I think all this is so fair, but it's funny because I came out feeling differently, slightly differently about the combat and like the stealth of the gameplay, and I would say moderately more positive on the puzzle elements. And I don't know, that could be because I was a little more thorough and experienced, I think, more of the game than maybe the rest of the panel, but also that may have just been that I like that stuff a little more. I'll start with the combat, and the combat overall, I'll definitely say by the time I was in the third area, I was doing a lot less of like thorough stealth, take out every guy and find new things to do so than I was early on. Early on, so satisfying to me. I actually really liked clearing out areas, even if it was very samey. But I will agree that I would have liked to see some sort of progression. I don't know, excuse me, I don't know how that looks in a game like this that is so tied to reality and cinema, where as opposed to a normal game, you're like, oh, well, by the third act, I need the, like, we're playing a game, and I'm we're playing Control for our current games club. And I got a feeling that game's progression is kind of never going to end, and it's going to be super impressive and fantastic as we go along.
Yes.
And that's just not something you get that we got in this game.
Yeah.
Which I thought,
I kind of found that to be a little refreshing. Like that's, I guess, maybe the one place in Teo's like thing I might like separate myself out of a little bit is like progression, feeling like I like new weapons and new mechanics. I don't think I need it here, and also I do get it in every other game. Like this game has two things sort of missing from it, which I love, which is that and crafting.
Yeah.
And I'm like happy about that, because it feels like it's almost impossible to design a game without crafting and without severe RPG elements. Although there are some RPG elements here, like to Teo's point, they aren't very like well fleshed out. They are just like these books where you can like upgrade
you exchange your experience to read them.
Yes, you barely ever feel it when you get those, and so
it's one of those with that too. I'll agree too that like I actually was kind of refreshing for me, but I agree with Teo in the sense that like there wasn't really progression, but it didn't bump for me as much. What the issue was that it just got kind of stale as I went along. It took a long time for that to get the combat and the stealth to get stale for me, but it did happen. And then to your point, Jeremy, you were making some other point that really resonated with me.
No crafting.
I mean, I'm glad I didn't have that in this game. I'm glad I was just picking up bread, fruit, and bandages, and great.
But you can see a world where they shove that in there, right? Because Indiana Jones, you could argue, is sometimes about like having to tie a stick to a rock and then do a thing. But it's because that didn't happen at all. I'm like very thankful. I'm like, thank you.
Yes.
Different kinds of games can exist.
Mm-hmm. I remember what my thought was, and we were talking about how it feels like the upgrade system through reading books and collecting those. It feels like that they account for that throughout the game, and they expect you to, so it doesn't really feel significant. There's not necessarily like, I actually leaned really heavy on improving my stamina and my like awareness rather than my combat strength and this and that. So it kind of, I almost would have. It's satisfying in the moment. It's like a dopamine hit when you find a book and use your experience, or find the medicine bottles and exchange them for like secrets or a new map. But ultimately, it's a kind of hollow progression system is how I might describe it. I also want to say, about the puzzles. That's where I wanted. Well, actually, I'll stay with combat really quick. I think the big highlight for me on the combat was using all the different silly items you can use. Like I love picking up a giant mallet or like a pickaxe and beating the shit out of some Nazis with that. But I had just as much fun being like, the only thing I have here is a paintbrush, and at least it has 3 dots. So I'm gonna try to kill a Nazi with a paintbrush, that I found really fun. And like, I was actually a fan of weapon like degradation in the Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom games. I know it's not hot for everybody, but I liked it in this one because it forced that improvisation, even if it ended up being me leaning on the same sorts of weapons or go-tos. I don't think I even got that creative with the combat, but I liked it enough, is I think what I'll say.
Yeah, you're right, Jeremy, about the crafting thing, because I could actually see that exact system of like, you pick up like a broom, but you can then use your like repair kit or something and turn that into like a spear, and now it's got like 5 points of degradation.
And then you have to fish with it. Yeah.
Exactly. I did like the system. It was fun to like just pick. You could kind of pick up a lot of stuff and be like, okay, this can also be a weapon. Like
I got an achievement for hitting a Nazi with a fly swatter once. Yeah. Did you guys get any funny ones?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The guitar. If I saw a guitar too, I was like, I'm picking up that guitar and making a funny noise with it as I hit somebody.
Or the bell. You can hit people with bells, and it'll alert the other guys around that you're hitting guys.
Yeah. This has been talked about widely about this game, but I did like that you were kind of discouraged to use guns to shoot because of how much it just breaks it brings the alert of all the enemies around you.
I started shooting some guys recently, and it was just like it's also kind of sucks. Like,
oh really?
I think they also tried to do some like period authentic gunplay with it, so the guns just don't work that good, and they're just like hard to hit guys, and then they're kind of spongy. It's like a weird.
Interesting.
Like, yeah, it's a weird thing where I'm just like, ugh. Like I oftentimes I'll pick up a machine gun and you hit X and it turns that bad boy around, and now I gotta
that's
hitting
where it's
a
at.
guy with that machine gun.
That's good. The other thing I wanted to touch on was just to express how I felt a little differently, more positive, was the puzzles. Some of them, were so simple and easy, and if you have the right note, it's like, oh, here's the combination for this lock, or the order I'm supposed to do this certain puzzle in the Vatican. But I had enough puzzles in this game that I felt really smart doing, because I felt like it was almost always the side stuff where it would be that you have like most of the information you need, but you still need to make an educated guess or do some deducing in your own head. Like, they just don't give you the answer for certain things. And so because of that, I actually really liked some of them. There was one in particular, I was trying to describe this to somebody the other day, where this was in Giza. This may have been a mandatory puzzle, I don't remember, where essentially you had to put like 4 blocks in a certain order that each had like an inscription on it, or like a painting of something, some art. And this is just calling back to the example I was giving, but seeing that the game not giving you the answer of what the order was, and me having to sort of decipher what I thought that meant. And when it worked the first time I tried it, but after some deducing, I felt so smart. That just felt so great. But I think it's fair, like you guys were saying. A lot of the puzzles in this game are, do you have the right note? Can you just, or even brute force? I accidentally brute forced a puzzle in Thailand, a main quest puzzle. Tao, remember when you have to do all of the, it was the one where you're moving people around to turn the statues.
Yeah. Yeah, the entire town comes together to help Indiana Jones solve a puzzle.
Yes. I was like, that I accidentally brute forced a one section of that. But in talking about this too, I wanted to highlight, I was just blown away by one side quest that was optional in Thailand. Tao, did you do the side quest where you went into the cave that had like what they called a ghost in it?
Oh, I don't think I did that one.
I couldn't believe this only further underlined the story stuff and made it seem more, made it just underlined the main thing that was going on for Indiana Jones in this game. But essentially, Jeremy, this is a side quest that you hear this rumor after completing another side quest about this ghost cave in this area in Thailand. So you have to sneak through a Nazi camp, you find the cave, and you essentially hallucinate before you solve the puzzle. And the hallucination leads to this whole 15 to 20 minute side moment in the story where you're back at the college and you are like circling through the same corridor of the college as it grows more and more affected by your brain, and it becomes like overrun by like moss and I don't know, what would you describe that when like the growth, like nature
like
sort
ivy.
of overtakes it.
Yeah.
And while this is all happening, you're hallucinating, you're having just all the character shit be underlined for him. And it's one of those things that it felt like I was in like an Alan Wake game, is what it felt like, or Control, or like Twin Peaks or something. And we've been talking about this so much lately, Jeremy. Yeah. And I will say, both from a presentational standpoint and narratively what they did there, I just couldn't believe it when I finished it. Jeremy, it's one side quest that when you get to Thailand, if you get any, I think your main point of contact there will sort of push you to look for this ghost cave. Go do that one at least.
Yeah, that side quest sounds exceptional, but I would also argue that like every side quest in this game, for the most part, like not the collectible stuff where you have to get like 20 of an item, but like the authored side quests like are really impressive to me. They're kind of their own little short stories, like in and of themselves, and it's like that's the way you do it, man. That's the way you got to do it. Is like make it like so juicy and worth it. Like, and I never felt like when I was pursuing a side quest that I was doing something that was going to waste my time, and so far that's been true. I'm sure that there's some exceptions to that, but like so far where I'm at, like it just feels like at least the ones that don't have giant like cutscenes attached to them and like cool stuff, at least they're short. Like they're like go grab a thing and you get a little book, and they're interesting too. Like there's actually a haunted cave you visit in Giza actually that's like it's supposed to be haunted, but then when you get there it's like a radio that's like playing spooky sounds or something. And that's like just that's like a little joke of a side quest, but it's like good. Or like follow the footprints in Giza to find the grave robbers and they're all dead. It's like oh man, it's like these cool little like short stories, you know.
I feel like environmental artists really don't get enough like
oh my gosh
love in the industry. Like the one side quest where you're just helping that nun in the Sistine Chapel, and you're just like, oh, this is the Sistine Chapel. They've like completely modeled it out. I didn't know that's what it looked like. Like
me neither.
That's how it is. And then you look up and you're like, okay, that's all the painting. And maybe that part is easy to do because you just like take a high res photo and just map it onto like the
maybe
polygons or whatever. But it's still just impressive of like creating that world. And they really like they went all out on the environments.
They really did. I think that's where like a lot of the first person perspective does really shine, is the like environments, the interactables. Jeremy, you were talking about like just really digging the side quests, and I would say the moment that this game, like I went from liking this game to realizing that I was falling in love with it was like I was like about halfway through the Vatican main story, and I finally started to poke around on some of the side content and go do side quests and meet new characters. There's one that like I've heard a lot of people talk about on podcasts, which is where, because you're Indiana Jones dressed as a priest for part of that area, when you have that costume on, I'm assuming you both did the confessional like moment where you like that Nazi comes and confesses to you.
Yes.
That one I've heard highlighted a lot, but I'm having trouble of thinking of other ones. It was a moment like that where I realized I was getting so much personally out of digging deeper into what they had here. At least side quest wise. Yeah, some of the collectible stuff I was doing it, Jeremy, to like check off a box for myself, but it was just it didn't. Those weren't as near as satisfying. Jeremy, I haven't really spun this to you yet. Is there an element of this game that we haven't discussed or that you want to further highlight while we're here?
Well, we did kind of talk about it, or at least we like threw out like the joke of like Indiana Jones like moving kind of slow or being a little lumbery or whatever, and like it's just a very weird thing of like that's where I'm at in my like game. Like journey with video games, where I'm like, I appreciate these like very lived in and authentic like gameplay mechanics that make me like describing this game as a sim is actually, I think, more apt than any other genre, right? Like it's so it's simulating what it might be like to be in the body of Indiana Jones, and it's like, yeah, give me this game in VR, baby. Let's go. Let's like give me like a version. Like I want to be more, and it's almost like a weird like preamble to like where games are going or where they can go. Is like this like, instead of it just being like, what's the twitchiest, fastest, most Bayonetta way to play a game? Like, what if we actually slowed it way down and zoomed way in and made you feel like you were immersed in it? I think that is what charmed me. And it continues to charm me so much about the game. So that's really my only thing.
I love that element of it too. I found myself like sort of combining the like sort of an authorial, like cinematic nature, but also the immersive nature of the game, where I was at so many points of the game was so specific on how I was even like moving around, because I felt like I was role playing as him.
Yeah.
Whether it be like sneaking around a corner or looking a certain way, or just the way I would walk through and look up at a vista or a monument. So much of that was, I think, only bolstered by a little, I wouldn't call it patience, but just like really soaking in a moment and slowing down, like you're kind of saying.
Yeah, and also a last thing sort of off this too is like controller mapping is getting so good, guys. Like this game in the hands just feels so good, and like I felt like I was an extension of Indiana. I was like me, like kind of cycling through my stuff. It felt like the controller equivalent of like me tapping my pockets to make sure my keys and wallet were all there. Like, it just felt like that part of it. And there's actually a few other games I've been playing recently that are doing this, where it's like they're just using the full controller to make sense of what you might naturally go to if you wanted to check a map or check your inventory or check whatever. And like I just love that stuff. Like more innovation in how controller works, you know?
Yes. I'll say by the end of the game, Jeremy, I was in total lockstep with you on that. I actually struggled for a lot of the game, at least the early parts, because I like sort of stopped and started my playthrough of this, where I started the game, learned how that worked, and then when I came back to it, I couldn't remember how to put an object away. So I would like eat a piece of fruit, and then my next fruit would come out, and I'd be like, I don't want anything in my hands. Like, just put this away, and I just couldn't do it. But then by the end, I got locked into that again. So I really did like that.
There is almost like an element where like you're going too fast when you're going through your items. It's like Indiana Jones like gets confused, and I'm like, use a bandage, and it's like, no, I'm still holding the bread. It's like I'm eating the bread. You're like, no, I want you to eat the bandage.
Yeah, absolutely. So funny. A couple little things I want to touch on really quick, and then I think I'll just sort of open it up to you guys for any outstanding stuff we haven't discussed that you would like to. But these are smaller, but we kind of touched on it earlier Jeremy talked about this in the trailer, but the sound effects in this game, both the familiar of like, oh, that's like soothing to my brain to hear the Indiana Jones whip crack, which I think has been shared by a lot of people, or just like the general SFX and sound design in this game I really liked. Sort of being able to, especially I have like a very modest but decent surround sound system in my living room, so being able to like listen to where, you know, enemies were, or hear the acoustics of a different room, like being in a tomb versus being out in the open air, I thought was so impressive. And of course, just even like the smack of a punch from Indy was so satisfying. Did you guys have any thoughts on the sound effects, sound design, or even the music for this game?
It was good. It was good. It was good stuff.
Just like last thought. Are you asking for like last thoughts on the game? Or
no, I was asking you about the sound effects and the music.
Oh yeah, great.
Because I was just sharing that I really liked them and just was wondering if you had thoughts.
No, it's all really good. I also like the sounds of all the different weapons.
Yeah,
just all have like slightly different sounds, which I thought was really cool.
Totally,
it's definitely It's cool to hear that, you know, those John Williams scores really still hit even after you hear it for 8 million times.
Yep. Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, the little Mickey Mousing, I think they call it in scoring, where it's like every touch will trigger a sound cue, you know, like how when like Mickey Mouse walks, it's like bump, ba bump, ba bump, you know.
Yeah.
So I think it's like you know, when he's so old, that guy John Williams, and like one day we won't have him, and it's like, who's carrying that torch? You know, I don't even know. I can't point to another person who's
Hans.
Well, Hans is like I feel like equally as popular or like big, but he's just got a whole different thing going on.
Yeah.
Is it Giacchino? I feel like had sort of a Williams thing to him for a while. It's a great question, Jer. Dudes, I've gotten to discuss so much of what I wanted to about this game. I'm sure there's going to be thoughts that I didn't share, But I'd love to just turn to closing thoughts from you guys and get your honest feelings on, where you're at leaving this game. Jeremy, I'll go ahead and start with you just because you've got a little more of your journey left. Where are you at this point overall, and how are you feeling about this game moving, I guess, forward into the rest of it?
I mean, I'm feeling so great, and I'm feeling more motivated than ever to continue the game. It's weird that sometimes little spoilers actually like propel you into like wanting like the fact that you guys kind of dropped that like there are these cool micro sequences in it is actually making me thrilled that it's not just gonna be like big space end. Like I like that it's gonna change its pace up a little bit, and so it's getting me really excited. So I'm thrilled to do it, and I almost guarantee that by the end of the game I'll warm out on it just a tiny bit, but but even with that, like it's still overall I would rank it really high in my games of 2024. I would say it's like number 3 or 4 or something. It's up there.
I feel you. Dude, Jared, I do want to get this from you because I was trying to figure out what I thought was what the Great Circle was this whole time. Do you have a prediction, Jeremy, for where you think this is going? Because I'll say I was wrong on what I thought was happening.
To be honest with you, I wish I was smart enough to predict anything about the Great Circle. I have no idea what it's going to be or what it's going to be connected to. I guess my only guess right now is that it is going to have some religious, like maybe probably Judeo, like Christian, roots or something, like in the same way that like the Last Crusade did in Raiders of the Lost Ark, as opposed to like a pagan thing or like an alien thing or something. But all I'll say is very good guess. Okay, great. Yeah.
I'll just say what I thought it was really quick. Yeah. Because of the cyclical nature of like Indy sort of going throughout his life, and that one side quest I did where you keep going through the same corridor and seeing it over and over again, and like how you can't go back and change things. I thought there was a moment where it was going to be a like time travel thing, like it was going to open that up, and that's what the Nazis were trying to get, but it's not where it goes.
Cool.
Teo, I'll turn to you. You've finished this game, buddy. How are you leaving this experience? What are your overall thoughts leaving the Great Circle?
Well, I thought for a long time that the Great Circle was when you do like the circle below your hip thing, you make someone look at it. That's what I thought it was going to
be. With the hand gesture, and then you get to punch them.
You're going to punch them right in the arm.
Yes.
My takeaway from this game is like ultimately I am impressed that they took a shot at the game. They took a big swing. I don't think it was like a big hit for me.
Yes.
But I'm very excited to see a sequel if they ever make one. I'm very excited to see for them to double down on things that they wanted to double down on that maybe they couldn't because of like, you have to get all these assets and you have to make like this first iteration of this game, and it's one of those games where it's like the sequel is always going to be way better because they can actually focus on the game itself, and that's what I'm excited to see.
Awesome. Thank you. For me, I'll just close out echoing a lot of my thoughts that I've shared on this. I adored this experience. This maybe would be my second, if not my favorite game from last year. It may have even passed Rebirth for me, just when it comes to titles that I played last year. And overall, I didn't realize, I'm so thankful that we got this because it ended up being an additional Indiana Jones story that I kind of didn't know if we would ever get. And it was so fun to see that extended in this game in a similar way that I was really satisfied when I played the Telltale Back to the Future game years ago. It was a similar thing where I was like, oh my gosh, this feels like such an original yet true to source material narrative following these characters, and where just seeing a different adventure for them. It explores a side of Indiana Jones that we only get, a shallow version of in some of the films, or even just like a fraction of that they don't fully dive into. And I loved it. I loved all the elements of this game, even the ones that grew a little stale for me, or that I thought were a little like by the end of the game when the AI is looking straight at me and only kind of reacting and thinking there's something strange. Yeah, I found that a little strange, but overall, couldn't be more positive on this game, and it just ended up being such a great surprise for me. So, yeah, bravo to the makers of this game, and like Tao, I'm excited to see where they go from here, and they've got to make a sequel for us. I'm really hoping for that now. But if they don't, honestly, I will be so satisfied with this as like one of my favorite. I think this is like one of the greatest sort of like movie tie-in / licensed games, especially for an original story. I think it's amazing. But anyway, that's going to do it for our thoughts on the game. If you're listening to this episode on YouTube or on Patreon, let us know in the comments or on Discord what you thought about Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. We'd love to hear from you. But on our way out, before we go and wrap up this episode, I want to get some plugs from our panel. So Jeremy, buddy, thank you for taking the time to play this game and join me for this episode and edit it for me. What do you want to plug on your way out, buddy?
My podcast, Video Games, a Comedy Show, anywhere podcasts can be found.
Mr. Tao Yang, thank you as well for being here, dude. What do you want to plug?
Check me out, dropout.tv, whatever stuff I pop up in, plus Herald Night, Mondays. Come on out.
Hell yeah. Power of attorney, baby. You know who doesn't need an attorney? Indiana Jones. Or does he? He probably would need an attorney, wouldn't he?
I would love to see a legal.
Underwater with all of the lawsuits.
Of course. Anyway, I'll go ahead and just close this out with some plugs of my own. We've already talked about how the show is produced by the great Jeremy Schmidt, and the original music that you're going to hear throughout the episode is done by him as well. The cover art for Call Me By Your Game is done by Glenn J. You can find him and his other great works on Instagram at Glenn with 2 N's .JAY. You can follow the show all over social media on Instagram and Blue Sky, and YouTube too. If you're an audio only listener and you're hearing this on a free feed someday or on the Patreon, go ahead and give our YouTube channel a subscribe and check it out, because you'll see 3 handsome lads on this one, and don't you want that? And maybe Harrison Ford imagery at some point. Follow us there. You can follow me on social media at Connor_McCabe or Connor McCabe on Blue Sky. You can follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/consiscool69, where if you're listening to this episode as it comes out, I've been streaming my Control playthrough, and I'm doing a bunch of fun PS1 stuff over there as well. Last but not least, thank you so much to all of our patrons over at patreon.com/SuperNPCRadio for making this possible, especially the engineer toads at that $10 tier who get these episodes every single month. And I hope you're looking forward to the rest of the indie series. We have an awesome slate ahead for this year for these indie titles, actual indie games that we're going to be covering. Don't worry, we have 12 more. This is just a bonus. But if you're not on the Patreon and you like this content and you want to give back and support us for all these bonus episodes we do, patreon.com/SuperNPCRadio. We even have a free tier if you want to sign up there just to get your toes wet. There's all sorts of stuff. But that'll do it for the plugs, and that'll also bring us to the end of the show. So thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Call Me By Your Game co-op series. We will see you on the next one.